In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 NHL games happening on January 22nd, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 NHL games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Buffalo Sabres versus Montreal Canadiens. Sabres at Canadiens in Montreal feels less like a regular season stop and more like a little measuring stick night for both teams. Two clubs staring each other down in the same division, records that are almost mirror images, and a crowd that treats a weeknight at Bell Center like a playoff matinee. You look at where these teams sit right now and it is not a classic giant versus underdog setup. It is two hungry groups in the same weight class, sliding around the same part of the standings and trying to prove they are the real thing, not just a nice story. Montreal comes in at roughly 28 to 15 to 7. Buffalo sits around 27 to 17 to 5, so the gap in results is real but not massive. The difference is more about feel than raw numbers. Montreal at home has been solid with a record in the ballpark of 14 to 10 to 1, and you can feel that comfort in the way they skate at Bell Center, a little looser, a little more willing to lean into the crowd noise when the building swells. Buffalo on the road has been closer to a coin flip, somewhere near 11 to 11 to 2, and that kind of profile tells you they are capable but not exactly road bullies. It is like taking a good team out of its favorite coffee shop and asking if it still feels as sharp without its usual routine. The scheduling spot quietly tilts the ice a bit too. Both teams played last night, which usually sounds fair at first glance, but the details are not identical. Buffalo had to grind out a 5-3 win in Nashville, then hop on a plane and roll into Montreal. Montreal skated a 4-3 win at home against Minnesota and then went home to their own beds. Same number of minutes on the legs, very different amount of airport carpet under the feet. On back-to-backs, that little difference between a bus ride and a flight can show up in the last 10 minutes of a tight game, when legs feel heavy and decisions get just a little slower. Style-wise, this version of the Canadiens is not trying to slow anyone down. They sit near the very top of the league in goals per game, around 3.40, which tells you they are happy to attack, to push pace, and to accept that the game might get a bit messy. They are not obsessed with playing the perfect, airtight game. They are comfortable in what looks like chaos to everyone else. Buffalo, at roughly 3.27 goals per game, is not far behind, so you get two groups that like to skate, like to create, and are not shy about trading rushes. It is almost like watching two tech startups racing to ship features, knowing there will be bugs, but betting that speed wins. There is another little wrinkle with Montreal, and it shows up in their penalty minutes. They rank near the top of the league in time spent in the box, and that is not usually the badge of honor you hang on the wall, but it does tell you something important about their personality. They play with an edge, they push the line, and that leads to more special teams, more swings in momentum, and more chances for the game to break open. It is risky, sure, but it fits a team that is built to handle wild stretches rather than just calm, structured hockey. These teams met very recently, and that memory is still fresh enough to sting. Buffalo took that game 5-3 at home on January 16th, and that matters. Montreal now gets the rematch in their building, in front of fans who remember the last one and want the roles reversed. Revenge is not a stat, it is not listed on any spreadsheet, but anyone who has ever lost a game and circled the rematch on the calendar knows it is very real emotionally. Especially for a young roster, getting another crack at the same opponent only a week later can sharpen the focus in a way no whiteboard speech ever could. Injury-wise, both teams have some names on the report because everyone does at this point of the season, but the key offensive pieces and primary goaltenders are expected to be available. So we are not looking at a matchup where one side can shrug and say they were missing half their lineup. This is closer to a fair fight with the usual dings and bruises, and that is important when you are trying to judge which team covers a number rather than just who survives. Honestly, when you pile together home ice, the travel spot, the recent head-to-head result, the natural chaos that Montreal embraces, and the energy they tend to draw from that crowd, the scales start to lean in a pretty specific direction, even if it is not a blowout kind of edge. As our first pick for this matchup, the Montreal Canadiens money line is our full game side pick. The books are hanging a total number in the mid-sixes, around 6.5, and that is like a little neon sign flashing that these are not two defensive fortresses locking the doors. You do not see that kind of total on a regular basis unless there is a real chance the game pops open. Montreal, again, sits around 3.40 goals per game, which is elite scoring territory, and they give up roughly 3.26. Buffalo is in that same high-energy neighborhood, scoring roughly 3.27 and allowing just over 3.12. So both sides are doing their part at both ends of the ice, putting goals on the board and allowing just enough the other way to keep things very lively. If you are thinking of the game like a soundtrack, this is not a quiet acoustic set. It is closer to a full band rehearsal in a small room. Penalty minutes tell a big part of the story for totals too. Montreal living near the top of the league in that category means more power plays, more broken structure, and more rush chances after penalties expire. When whistles start flying, systems tend to loosen and skill takes over, and that usually favors more scoring rather than less. It is one thing to play a carefully controlled 5-on-5 game. It is another thing entirely when you are ping-ponging between special teams and broken line changes. If you check how these teams have been playing recently, the pattern really jumps out. Buffalo's last 5 games have produced combined goal totals of 8, 3, 9, 8, and 7. Montreal's last 5 have landed on 7, 11, 8, 5, and 9. So in 8 of those 10 combined outings, the game reached at least 7 total goals. That is not a guarantee, of course, but it shows you the rhythm both teams are living in right now. They are playing games where the scoreboard operator is not exactly relaxing. There is also the back-to-back factor, and it usually nudges things toward more scoring rather than less. On tired legs, it is often the defense that bends first. Shot blocking hurts more, gaps open a bit wider, and tracking back with full focus becomes harder. Skill and instinct still show up on the offensive side, even when players are a bit gassed, so you can get more rushes, more odd man looks, and more second chances around the net. We already saw, just a week ago, what happens when these two play their natural styles against each other. That 5-3 Buffalo win was not some freak event in a season full of 2-1 games. It was very much in line with the way both teams have been trending. They leaned into speed, they traded chances, and 8 goals went up on the board. Here's the thing, with 2 high-scoring teams, comfortable playing fast, carrying recent game logs full of big totals, stepping into another matchup on short rest, it is not hard to imagine this one tilting toward another busy night for the scoreboard. You do not need a perfect script for this game to clear a mid-6 number, you just need both teams to be themselves for 60 minutes, which they have been all season. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Vegas Golden Knights versus Boston Bruins. Picture this matchup like a heavyweight visit to a cramped old rink where the walls feel a little closer and the sound hits a little harder. Vegas is coming in with that swagger of a team that has been grabbing points in all kinds of buildings, not just soaking up the glow of home ice in the desert, and Boston is basically standing at center ice saying, "This is still our place." The Bruins are not just existing at home right now, they are rolling along with a multi-game winning streak in front of their fans, while Vegas shows up with a resume that screams we travel well after banking results all over the map. Now, the market is tipping its hand a bit. Vegas is sitting as a modest road favorite, roughly in that -130 range on many boards, while Boston is hanging just above even money as the home underdog. That pricing is the books telling you, very quietly, that they still trust the Golden Knights' overall body of work a touch more, but they are also admitting this is no blowout mismatch. It is closer to a coin flip than people might like to admit. And that is where things start to get interesting, because these two teams do not really want the same kind of game. Vegas brings in a recent stretch around 7 wins, 2 losses, and 1 extra time loss in its last 10, with a serious scoring surge and defensive numbers that hold up when you poke at them. They are comfortable playing confident, front-foot hockey, and they have been piling up goals without turning every night into pure chaos. On the other side, Boston has been winning in a way that feels very familiar to anyone who has watched this team over the years. They grind, they layer defensively, and they let their structure slowly squeeze the fun out of the other bench. Over the last run of games, they have taken 8 wins out of 9, and a lot of those nights have ended with the Bruins creating real separation late rather than just clinging on. Then we get to the rink itself. TD Garden is not some neutral setting where systems quietly clash and nobody raises their voice. It is loud, it is edgy, and it rewards teams that can live with a heavy forecheck and a lot of messy traffic around the crease. Boston has leaned back into that identity again, especially with key pieces on the blue line returning recently, which helps them get closer to the version of their defense that actually looks like Boston hockey, even if there are still a couple of names hovering as question marks or game-time decisions. Vegas, by contrast, is working through little cuts to its depth. It is not that their core has fallen apart, but multiple forwards and a depth defenseman sit in that out or injured reserve bucket around this date. Names like Brett Howden, Brandon Saad, and Colton Sissons, along with Rasmus Andersson in a not injury-related category with his return expected right around this day, might not headline a poster, but they matter when you want to roll four lines that all feel dangerous and tidy. When you chip away at that middle and bottom of the lineup, especially on the road, it becomes just a bit harder to keep every matchup perfectly sheltered, and that is where a smart home coaching staff can start to poke at edges. So when you pull the camera back, you see a few clear threads twisting together. You have a Vegas team that is still very good but a little thinner in those quieter minutes where nothing special is supposed to happen. You have a Bruins team on a heater at home, playing a style that fits the Garden and now backed by a healthier blue line that lets them lean again on their defensive identity. You have odds that still lean a bit too heavily into brand reputation and early season narrative rather than the razor-thin real-world gap you are likely to see in this particular game. Put all of that next to a home crowd that tends to tilt the ice emotionally as much as physically, and the value side of this feels less mysterious than the numbers might suggest at first glance. As our first pick for this matchup, the Boston Bruins money line is our full game side pick. The total for this one is sitting at 6.5 goals on most boards, and the way the prices are shaded tells a little story. The under is the side you have to pay more for, while the over usually comes with a slightly nicer number attached. In simple terms, the books are acknowledging that both of these teams can absolutely score, but they are not fully expecting a pure track meet in Boston. Vegas has been on a real heater in front of goal recently, putting up more than 4 goals per game across its last stretch of 10 while holding opponents under 3. That combination of firepower and structure is one reason their reputation leans offensive right now, not just defensive. Boston, though, has been stacking wins in a much more controlled way. They lean hard on structure, they rely on goaltending that shows up in big moments, and when they are nursing any kind of edge late, they are very willing to turn the third period into trench hockey where every puck along the wall feels like a small street fight. The interesting wrinkle is the setting. If this same matchup were under the Vegas lights, you could make a stronger case for something looser, with more stretch plays, more trading of chances, and a little more of that your turn, my turn feel on special teams. In Boston, especially with the Bruins facing a top opponent while riding a strong stretch at home, the script leans more careful. Shorter benches in key moments, more attention to matchups, and a real focus on keeping the middle of the ice stacked with bodies. All of that points more toward a game where it is harder for rush chances to turn into repeat highlight reels. Those depth issues on the Vegas side also nudge the style a bit. With forwards like Brett Howden, Brandon Saad, and Colton Sissons out of the picture around this time and Rasmus Andersson slotted in a not injury-related category with his return targeted right about now, you are looking at a lineup that still has teeth but might be less eager to ramp up the pace for a full 60 minutes if the game stays tight. On the road, against a structured team in a loud building, it would not be surprising to see them play more selectively with their pushes, rather than constantly forcing high-risk transitions. Then there is the shared identity piece. Both of these organizations, regardless of which individual netminder gets the tap, are comfortable building around systems that push shots into spots their goalies like and away from the real danger areas. They do not need the game to become a festival of odd-man rushes for the offense to feel involved. They can live with long stretches of play where the puck stays to the outside, the chances are controlled, and every mistake feels a bit heavier because opportunities are limited. When you stack that on top of the market shade toward the lower scoring side of the total and the playoff-style atmosphere that this matchup tends to create, the expectation tilts toward a slower-moving scoreboard than the reputations of these attacks might suggest. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Dallas Stars versus Columbus Blue Jackets. On paper, this has that familiar big contender versus plucky underdog feel, the kind of matchup you have probably seen on late-night national television plenty of times. Dallas walks into Nationwide Arena sitting in second place in the Central with a record of 28-13-9 and riding the momentum of a 6-2 beatdown of Boston. Columbus is still hovering near the bottom of the Metro at 22-20-7, and on the surface that alone can scare people away from touching the home side. But if you zoom in on how these two teams look right now, the story is a lot more interesting. Over the last 5 games, Columbus has stacked 4 wins before finally getting tripped up by Ottawa on Tuesday, while Dallas has only 2 wins in that same stretch after working through a 3-game skid. The Blue Jackets have already marched into Dallas once this season and walked out with a 5-1 win, so this is not some bright-eyed underdog seeing the big green jerseys for the first time and freezing under the lights. You also have the new coach bump in play, and that always matters more than people admit. Rick Bowness is still very new behind that Columbus bench, and his group responded with 4 straight wins before that loss to the Senators, playing looser, faster, and with a bit of that nothing-to-lose-at-home swagger that tends to bother polished contenders. If you have ever watched a team right after a coaching change, you know the feeling. The crowd leans in, shifts get shorter, and guys are trying to prove they should be part of the new plan. Dallas is still the more proven machine across a long season. There is no real debate there, but they are also in that classic contender rhythm where the schedule gets choppy. They have just run through that road swing out west, then came home for 2 very emotional games, a physical pounding from Tampa and then a big response win over the Bruins, and now they are hopping on another flight into a building that has been noisy and proud again. That kind of rhythm is fine for a veteran room, but it does open the door for flat starts and trap night vibes, especially against a team that already punched you in the mouth once. Layer in the health picture and it tilts the balance in a subtle way. Mikko Rantanen, their top playmaker, is officially day-to-day with illness after missing that Bruins game, and important pieces like Tyler Seguin and Lion Bichsel are still out long-term, so Dallas is not exactly at full throttle even if the logo suggests they are. Columbus has their own injury list, with Dante Fabro, Miles Wood, and Denton Mateychuk out, but those absences have been baked into this recent 4-game hot streak, so the way they are playing now already reflects that reality. In goal, the storylines keep piling up. Elvis Merzlikins left Tuesday's game because of illness and sits in that same day-to-day zone, while Jet Greaves, who has actually posted the steadier numbers this season, is expected to get the start in a rink he knows and in front of a fan base that has started to believe again. There is a certain comfort when a goalie who has already carried a lot of this year's workload gets the net in a familiar building, and for a home dog, that confidence cuts both into the dressing room and up into the cheap seats. Now fold the market into the picture and it becomes a simple but uncomfortable question. Most books have Dallas around -125, with Columbus sitting in the neighborhood of +105 on home ice, which is basically the market saying, yes, the Stars are better, but this is not a free square. You are being asked whether you trust a live home underdog that has already handled this opponent once, is riding a real surge under a new coach, and now gets them in a sneaky scheduling spot, all while knowing this is still a speculative read on current form, not a guarantee of anything. As our first pick for this matchup, the Columbus Blue Jackets money line is our full game side pick. Dallas lives in that curious space between control and chaos, averaging 3.32 goals per game while allowing 2.76, but doing it on surprisingly low shot volume, roughly 25.4 shots a night. A power play flirting with the 30% mark and finishers like Jason Robertson, and when he is in the lineup, Rantanen turns small mistakes into sudden goals, so you do not always see a high shot count, but you do see high-quality chances. Columbus brings a very different brand of fun to the table. They regularly fire north of 30 shots per game, they score just under 3, and they give up 3.33, which is pretty much the statistical way of saying, we are going to trade chances and live with the consequences. If you have ever watched a game where every neutral zone turnover feels like it could become a rush, that is the energy this profile suggests, and fans tend to love it even when coaches lose a bit of hair over it. Under Bowness, the Jackets have not suddenly turned into a slow, grinding, low-event team either. That 4-game heater came from pushing the pace, letting Zach Werenski drive offense from the blue line, and giving young talent like Adam Fantilli, Kent Johnson, and Kirill Marchenko the green light to attack off the rush while the building buzzes around them. It is aggressive, it is risky, and it leans toward the kind of game where a 1-goal lead never feels safe for very long. Jet Greaves fits into that picture as well. He has been solid enough, not untouchable, but steady, and now he is staring down a Dallas power play that has been sitting around 29% against a Columbus penalty kill in the mid-70s. That is exactly the kind of matchup where a couple of minor penalties, a careless stick, or a bad line change can snowball into multi-goal swings, especially when the visiting team has that kind of skill on the man advantage. Of course, it is not just Dallas that can put up crooked numbers on a good night. Columbus already tagged them for 5 in that earlier 5-1 win, and Jake Oettinger, for all his overall quality, has shown he can get dragged into track meets when the skaters in front of him loosen up, just like we saw in that rough outing against Tampa. There is a bit of a pattern there. Once the structure breaks for either side, the game can suddenly feel like a race rather than a chess match. The number on this game is sitting at 6.5, with the over and under priced fairly close together, which tells you the books are expecting offense but are not willing to plant a flag on which bench is doing the heavy lifting. When you combine two dangerous power plays, a Jackets team that basically has to lean into offense if it wants to win, and a Stars squad that rarely stays quiet for long under normal conditions, the setup tilts toward a game with swings, momentum shifts, and enough quality chances that a higher scoring script feels more likely than a tight, low-event grind. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Pittsburgh Penguins versus Edmonton Oilers. When you see Penguins and Oilers on a late January slate, you are not exactly expecting a calm, low-key evening in Edmonton's barn. You have Pittsburgh dragging their gear into town on the second leg of an Alberta back-to-back after a heavy game in Calgary. And you have Edmonton, feet up at home, sleeping in their own beds, living in the same routine they like at Rogers Place. That kind of spot matters more than people admit, because one team is catching a short flight, squeezing in a hotel night, and trying to flip the switch again, while the other is rolling into the rink the way you stroll into your regular coffee shop. Odds makers clearly see that gap. They are hanging Edmonton as a clear home favorite, pricing them in that solid range where the books are saying, without saying, that the Oilers should not just sneak this one out. They should be in a position where winning by margin is very realistic. You can almost feel it in the line. Whenever you see that kind of favorite at home in this kind of travel and rest setup, it is a little nudge that the market expects the better rested, more comfortable team to be the one dictating how this game is played. It is easy to say it is all about one superstar, but honestly, the bigger story is how Edmonton tilts the ice with depth and pace, even with bodies missing. They are sitting near the top of their division for a reason, scoring north of 3 goals a night and running a power play that looks more like a cheat code than a normal special teams unit, with that conversion rate well into the 30s in percentage terms. Pittsburgh is not toothless either. They are hovering just over 3 goals a game themselves with a power play that ranks right near the top of the league, so it is not like the Penguins are rolling in with a pop gun offense. The twist is that Edmonton can bring that pressure shift after shift, while Pittsburgh is doing all of this with a blue line that has been taped together, missing some of its key defensive pieces. That is where this spread conversation really heats up. A tired team with a banged-up defense, coming off a physical game the night before, marching into a loud building against a rested attack that can score in waves. That is the kind of mix that can turn a tight game into a lopsided scoreboard very quickly in the third period. Then you layer in the goalie situation. Edmonton went out and changed the picture in net when they flipped Stuart Skinner for Tristan Jarry back in December, and that was not just a paperwork move. That was a statement that they wanted more stability when games tilt into those high-pressure moments late. Pittsburgh, on the other side of that trade, is still figuring out how their own crease rotation looks on different nights, which can be tricky when you are tired and chasing the matchup on the road. So when you stack it all up, you have the rest edge, the home crowd, the sharper firepower, and a Penguins defense that might be doing more surviving than controlling, especially as legs get heavier in the final 10 minutes. Let me explain it this way. If you ran this game 100 times in this exact spot, with this rest and travel and injury picture, you would probably see a solid chunk of results where Edmonton not only wins, but pulls away enough to get past that spread line comfortably. As our first pick for this matchup, the Edmonton Oilers money line is our full game side pick. The total number sitting out there is 6.5, and that line is almost teasing you because it lives right in that zone where one wild stretch in the second period can flip an under into an over before you have even refilled your drink. On paper, both defenses have decent-looking goals against numbers. Pittsburgh sitting under 3 allowed per game, Edmonton a touch over 3, so at first glance you might think, all right, maybe this is not a track meet. Here is the thing, once you look at what they actually do when they get rolling, it starts to feel a lot more like one of those end-to-end, back and forth nights. These two teams combined to score around 6.5 goals a game by themselves on average, which already nudges right up against that posted total before you even talk about game flow or special team swings. Both power plays are top shelf. Edmonton is converting well over 30% of its chances, and Pittsburgh is right there just under 30%. So if this whistle-happy crew gives them even a few extra calls, you are suddenly talking about clean one-timers and backdoor tap-ins instead of 5-on-5 grind. They have already given us a 10-goal game this season, a 6-4 kind of script that looks wild on the box score but actually fits how these styles clash. And if you look at their overall patterns, Edmonton games have cleared that 6.5 marker in more than half of their outings, and Pittsburgh is not far behind, with plenty of nights where the scoreboard lights up past that same number. That is not some tiny sample fluke. That is what happens when you mix high-end skill, aggressive attacks, and power plays that punish even small mistakes. Then you go back to the situation around this specific matchup. Pittsburgh is coming off that grind in Calgary, where you burn a lot of energy just trying to get pucks out and win battles. And now they have to chase a quicker Edmonton attack on tired legs. Tired teams foul more, their gaps get loose, and their penalty kill reads slow down just a touch, which is the last thing you want against this kind of power play. Edmonton, at home, rested, and already comfortable playing at a high tempo, is not likely to downshift for anyone, so if the Penguins want to stay in it, they probably have to trade chances instead of shutting things down. Honestly, this feels less like a game that gently drifts toward a 2-1 score and more like one of those nights where you glance up and it is already 3-2 midway through the second, and you are suddenly tracking every rush like it might be the one that pushes the total over the edge. If special teams end up deciding big chunks of this contest, the math tilts toward more red lights than fewer, and you get a picture that looks a lot more like a 4-3 style finish than a sleepy defensive clinic. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Detroit Red Wings versus Minnesota Wild. Detroit rolls into St. Paul with that "we just stole 2 points in overtime" swagger still buzzing in the room, fresh off that tight 2-1 OT win in Toronto, where they finished off the season sweep of the Leafs. They had to work for it too, getting pushed early, burning energy to claw back, and then stretching things out in overtime, which is great for confidence but not so great for legs on the second night of a trip. Now it is customs, a time zone shift, and a late puck drop at Grand Casino Arena for Game 2 of a road back-to-back, and they are walking straight into a matchup with a team that has quietly put together a slightly stronger full-season profile. Minnesota sits at 28 to 14 to 9, with a healthier +17 goal differential compared with Detroit's more modest +5 at 31 to 16 to 4, and they have picked up points in most of their home dates, which kind of tells you this building has been friendly to them. They score a little more, roughly 3.2 a night, and give up a little less, about 2.8, which puts them around the top 10 in goals scored and around the top 12 in goals allowed, while Detroit sits more in that true middle range at just over 3.1 for and 3.0 against. Here is the thing, those are not video game numbers, but over a long season that kind of small edge starts to matter, especially when one side is rested and the other is living out of a suitcase. Minnesota already got their reset at home after that crazy road swing through Buffalo, Toronto, and Montreal, so they get to roll in with fresher legs and a normal routine, while Detroit is eating hotel food and trying to trick their bodies into feeling fresh again. Sportsbooks are not sentimental either. They have nudged the Wild into that roughly -150 favorite range for a reason, and it lines up with the classic rested home team versus tired road team spot that bettors talk about all the time. Detroit's 8-game heater is absolutely real, and it is fun, and it makes people want to keep riding them, but winning that many close games on the road starts to pull against gravity a little bit. Regression does not show up on the scoreboard in one big lump. It kind of leaks in through little things, slower backchecks, missed clears, losing more 50-50 pucks, especially at 5-on-5 where Minnesota has been just a bit sharper and more comfortable dictating play in this rink. Honestly, when you stack up the season-long numbers, the energy situation, and the home ice factor, it becomes pretty clear which side has the more favorable setup to handle the spread in this one. As our first pick for this matchup, the Minnesota Wild money line is our full game side pick. Over the season, these teams combine to score about 6.2 goals per game and allow about 5.8, so their true profile is already hovering right around that 6-goal mark before you even consider anything like game script, score effects, or tired legs on a back-to-back. Both attacks have plenty of bite. Detroit's power play has been one of the best in the league, cashing just under 25% of the time with 40 goals on 161 chances, and Minnesota's unit is right there with 40 goals on 168 opportunities at roughly 24%. That is two very capable power plays going up against penalty kills that live in the high 70% range rather than the elite 80+ territory, and in practical terms that means one lazy stick, one bad clear, and suddenly you are halfway to a high-scoring night without much warning. If you look at Minnesota's recent scoreboard, it tells the same story in big block letters: 5-4 in Buffalo, 6-3 in Toronto, 4-3 in Montreal, totals of 9, 9, and 7 goals in a row, and that is not an accident. Those games have had that wide-open, trading chances feel, where their offense is humming and their defense is more bend but do not break than suffocating, which is fun for viewers and a little stressful for anyone holding an under ticket. Detroit has leaned into drama too, with recent scores of 4-3, 4-3, and that 2-1 overtime game, and their season overall has averaged just over 6 combined goals, with nearly half of their games already clearing 6.5, which is the kind of pattern that makes totals bettors perk up. Now layer in the context. A tired road team on the second night of a back-to-back often means more stick infractions, slower gaps, and more odd man rushes. And there is also a slightly higher chance we see the other goalie at some point, whether by design or because the starter is having a rough go. Both benches also have coaches who are not shy about yanking the netminder early when they are chasing, which can turn the final 2 or 3 minutes into a mini-goal festival, or at least a very sweaty stretch for anyone sitting on an under ticket. 7 goals is absolutely a realistic outcome here, not some wild long shot, especially with 2 dangerous power plays and a pace that can tilt up if either side falls behind and starts stretching the ice. This is not the kind of matchup where you root for every blocked shot and frozen puck. It is the one where you are secretly cheering for both benches to keep pushing instead of sitting back and trying to nurse a 1-goal lead for 20 minutes. Honestly, if you like a dramatic, back-and-forth style game with special teams in the spotlight and chances both ways, this total sets up more like a sweat for people who need it to stay low than for people who need it to creep higher. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.